I grew up fascinated with food. With time, I learnt the importance of a healthy and holistic lifestyle. I still had a lot of questions about diet though, like which one was the best one? Keto, Atkins, paleo? Was there an optimal diet for your blood type? Could you really get a wheat belly? Amongst all my confusion, it was clear to me this was not my best life until I stumbled across a plant-based whole foods lifestyle. Suddenly, it all made sense. From preventing cancer, diabetes, and heart disease, feeling the most well and energetic I had ever felt in my entire life, helping the environment, and respecting other sentient beings on our beautiful planet. I decided to dig deeper with a little help from the experts and influencers. Can being plant-based really make you a game changer? Is this the most sustainable way of living? This is Plant Perspective. Well, hello there, YouTube fan, and a very warm welcome to you on this episode of Plant Perspective. If you're not part of my YouTube family yet, well, you're very welcome to be, so go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And while you're at it, why not hit the bell sign too, so you can get regular notifications every time a new video is out. Well, I am so honored to have join us on this episode Dr. Michael Klaper. Dr. Klaper has nearly 50 years of experience as a medical doctor. He has helped heal thousands of patients through a whole food plant-based diet. He was inaugurated to the North American Vegetarian Society's Vegan Hall of Fame in 1992. He is author of Vegan Nutrition Pure and Simple and has produced dozens of articles for both scientific journals and the popular press. A highly sought-after speaker, he is a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and currently serves on the advisory board for the Plantrician Project and the International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention. His Moving Medicine Forward initiative in partnership with Plant Pure Communities to inform and educate the doctors of tomorrow in medical schools around the world of the healing power of a plant-based lifestyle is a total game changer. Here to tackle the hard questions surrounding cancer and diabetes, as well as bring some much needed scientific backup to the healing properties of a whole foods plant-based diet, the doc is in. Dr. Klaper, thank you so much for the privilege of your time. It's so wonderful to have you join us on this episode.
Oh, thank you. The invitation was very welcome. I love all the people in Ireland and everyone who may be seeing this. It's great that you're providing this service to your viewers.
So, Dr. Klaper, you have a very extensive background in medicine. I mean, just take a look at all those diplomas, degrees, and certificates you've got so beautifully mounted on the wall behind you. I, for one, am not sure I've seen so many certificates in my life before.
I ordered them off the internet. You can get them printed any way you like there.
But for the benefit of our viewers, could you please give us a quick overview about your background in medicine, your experience, the sort of fields you've worked across, and also then tell us about how and why you decided to go plant-based and as a result to base your medical practice on lifestyle medicine and the benefits of a whole foods plant-based diet.
Okay, a very short capsule of a very long story, but a classically trained Western physician. I graduated from the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Chicago in the 70s. And took additional training in surgery, anesthesiology, obstetrics at the University of California, San Francisco. And for the first 10 years of my medical career, I practiced standard blood and guts medicine in emergency rooms, operating rooms, general practice offices. But my patients were not getting healthier. They were getting more obese and more diabetic and hypertensive and having strokes and heart attacks. And I got so discouraged that I left general practice after 7 years and went to become an anesthesiologist in Vancouver, BC. And I was an anesthesia resident on the cardiovascular anesthesia service, dealing with people's hearts and blood vessels. And every day I'm putting people to sleep and watching surgeons open their chest and open the arteries in their heart and pulling out this yellow, greasy gunk that was very evident even in the late 70s and early 80s that this was largely the fat of the animals these people were eating. There were already studies in the literature showing that a plant-based diet will melt this fat out of the arteries, the fat and cholesterol in the atherosclerotic plaques. And my dad died of clogged arteries. I clearly have those genes. I knew the message I was getting, that if I didn't change my diet to more plant-based, that I was going to be laying on that table with that striker saw going up my sternum, and I sure didn't want that to happen. And at the same time, I was on a spiritual quest to live a life of nonviolence. I had seen so much violence in the emergency room and the trauma unit at Cook County Hospital in Chicago growing up as a physician that I knew I wanted to get the violence out of my own life. And so I was reading the Indian Saints and Mahatma Gandhi and all these teachers on living a life of nonviolence. And one night, as an anesthesia resident, I'm out with dinner for dinner with a friend, pontificating about living a life of nonviolence while I'm polishing off a porterhouse steak in the local Kagan Cleaver restaurant. And my dinner companion looks at me with great compassion and says, "That's all very nice, Michael, but if you want to get the violence out of your life, you might want to start with that piece of meat on your plate, because in satisfying your desire for that taste of flesh in your mouth, you are paying for the death of the animal and for the next one in line at the slaughterhouse." Well, as soon as he said that, all the old rationalizations sprang in my head. Well, the animal's dead already, and that's what they raised them for, and all that. But before I could get the words out of my lips, the little voice on my shoulder said, "You know, he's right. He's right." And I had done a lot of my growing up on my uncle's dairy farm in Wisconsin. I saw the violence inherent in putting all meat on the plate. I chopped the heads off chickens. I saw the old dairy cow shot in the head. There's no way to get meat on the plate without violence. Farming is a violent industry. And so between the message I was getting from the operating room table and the message I felt in my heart that night, I knew the end of my meat eating had come. So I adopted a plant-based diet. My body loved it. Within 12 weeks, a 10-kilo spare tire of fat melted off my waist. My high blood pressure came to normal. My high cholesterol went to normal. I felt great waking up in a nice lean body every day. And at that point, I realized I didn't want to be an anesthesiologist and spend my career putting people to sleep. I'd rather go back to general practice and help them wake up. And so I did, and much to my parents' dismay, I left. I had 6 months to go in my residency, but it wasn't in truth. I wanted to go back and work with conscious people. And I started recommending plant-based diets to my patients in practice, and they experienced the same wonderful changes. They lost weight, their blood pressure came down, their diabetes got better. I got them off their insulin. And I became the happiest doctor I know. My patients get healthy right in front of my eyes. So that's been almost 40 years ago, 38 plus years ago, 1981, I guess. And so I've been a plant-based doctor ever since. It's the most powerful tool known to medicine, even though they don't recognize it, most doctors. And my career at this point is not only teaching my patients, but teaching the young medical students. I wish someone had told me this when I was a first-year medical student. Why didn't somebody say this? It would have changed every diagnosis I made, every treatment recommendation I made. So we started our Moving Medicine Forward initiative to deliver this message to young medical students, newly graduated doctors, that a plant-based diet will reverse these diseases you're spending most of your time trying to treat. And we can talk more about that, but that's the general arc of my medical career from the blood and guts Band-Aid applier, basically, to the healer who wants to work at the deepest level of getting people truly healthy. And so much of it is education, which is why I'm happy to do these interviews, because you really need to plant the awareness in people's heads, both doctors and patients. They say once you look behind the curtain, you can't pretend you don't know what's behind the curtain. And that's what we're trying to do here in this interview, is to tear that curtain down and talk about the truth of real healing with plant-based nutrition.
Absolutely. That's such a fascinating story, Dr. Klaper. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And a fun fact, by the way, speaking of Gandhi, he and I share the same birthday, the 2nd of October. October, 2nd of October.
October, that's right. October,
that's right. Yeah. And it's also International Non-Violence Day.
That's how I know it. Oh, lovely. Well, your namesake, your birthday mate there is a noble one, no doubt.
Well, Dr. Klaper, a lot of our viewers, they aren't plant-based, but they certainly are curious, which is why they're watching this. Now, I know for those looking into a plant-based vegan diet, there are often concerns and questions in regards to the quality of nutrients they'll be receiving on a plant-based diet, particularly the macronutrient protein. Now, as far as I'm aware, when it comes to animal sources of protein, they're sort of secondary sources if you think about it, because where are those animals getting their protein from, right? And on top of that, you know, they have their share of other unpleasantries, so endotoxins, and it's most likely they were injected with steroids. As if they don't have enough hormones of their own, they're probably injected with growth hormones as well. And then, you know, I often wonder, because they were murdered, because they were slaughtered, it's quite likely that when that happened, their bodies released harmful chemicals and toxins as a result. And that's, you know, what that piece of meat is most likely carrying with it. But when we think of, you know, plant-based sources of protein, well, they are the primary sources, and they don't have those, you know, harmful side effects to them. So, Dr. Klaper, can you please bring your expertise to the table here and tell us the facts when it comes to the quality of nutrients on a plant-based diet, particularly protein? What are we getting?
What you're getting is the complete supply of macro and micronutrients necessary to run this Homo sapiens bodies that we walk around in all day. When you just stop and look at our anatomy, we're clearly plant-eating hominids. We don't have claws on our hands. We've got fingers for peeling bananas and picking fruit. We have small mouths with flat grinding molar teeth and rotary jaws for grinding up the starches and fruits and grasses and grains that we forage for. That's really what nourished our Paleolithic ancestors, not mammoth meat every day. That we were largely starchivores back then. We have basically the same digestive anatomy that our gorilla and bonobo cousins have, and they're up in the trees eating leaves and fruit all day. And ask any gorilla if he gets enough protein. I mean, there are clear demonstrations. Now, all the big, powerful animals on the planet are herbivores. They're the buffaloes and the antelope and the giraffes and the muskox. These are massive animals who grow these fabulously muscular bodies on plant-based diets completely. And so clearly the nutrients are there. And if you just do a search on vegan bodybuilders and hit images, your screen will fill up with these pictures of these magnificent men and women with these rippling muscles who do it all on a plant-based diet. It's not an issue anymore. Can you get enough protein? In almost 50 years of medicine, I've never written as a diagnosis, and certainly not on a death certificate, protein deficiency. It just doesn't happen. If you are, and there's so much protein in whole grains and legumes, pulses, beans, peas, chickpeas, lentils, and all fruits and vegetables have protein. That if you're eating a good 1,800, 2,000 calories of whole plant foods, not cola drinks and candy bars, even if they're vegan. But if you're eating whole plant foods that grew out of the ground, beans and corns and greens and veggies, and you're eating about 1,800 to 2,000 calories of that a day to maintain your weight, you're automatically guaranteed of getting 60, 70 grams of high-grade protein, more than anybody needs. It's not an issue. And outside of the little issue of vitamin B12, which has disappeared from the plant eater's diet, mainly because we're not drinking out of streams anymore or eating unwashed vegetables. The B12 is made by bacteria in the soil, and because we're not, it's our bargain that we make with modern sanitation for clean water. We lost our B12 supply, so we've got to take some supplemental B12. Other than that, eat lots of beans and greens and fruits and veggies, and in all these wonderful cuisines, the Asian curries and the Mexican chilies and the stir fries and the stews and the soups. It's a glorious, delicious cuisine, and you'll easily get all the nutrients you need. It's not an issue. And as you already mentioned, that piece of animal muscle on the plate, that whether it's a cow muscle or a salmon muscle, whatever it is, you can bet these days, even organic grass-fed beef and all that stuff, there's no question. There are hormones in that meat from the animal itself. The water that they're drinking, that they're given at the feedlots in the last 6 months of their life, the fat in them has heavy metals. There's often mercury and cadmium and arsenic, and conventionally raised beef and chicken, there's pesticides and herbicides and all the grains that these animals are fed. It's a toxic brew. I don't care how red and juicy that steak looks. There are molecules in it that are going to do us great harm when eaten repeatedly. And just the inherent saturated fat and cholesterol, the very act of cooking animal muscle oxidizes cholesterol, which builds plaques up. There's a whole list in my slideshows on what's really in animal muscle. Every time you include meat in the diet, you're eating carcinogens and artery damaging foods. By the way, if people would like to see the talk that I give to the first year med students, it's called What I Wish I Learned in Medical School About Nutrition. Go to my website, drklaper.com, DOCTORKLAPER.com, and click on videos there and see the video I'm giving. And you'll see this because I share this with the medical student, and I have that list of contaminants. It's in every piece of chicken muscle, cow muscle, pig muscle, etc. So plants are where it's at. We're plant-eating creatures. When we eat that natural diet, we wind up lean and healthy with normal blood pressure, normal blood sugars. But when we eat the diet of the carnivore, of the mountain lion, we wind up clogged up and inflamed and cancerous. It just seems so evident the more we do this. It's not just me anymore. There's so many lifestyle doctors around delivering the same message. Eat whole plants and get on with it. Live your life. I have a T-shirt. Eat plants and get on with it already. It's the truth of it. We're plant-eating creatures, and we violate natural law when we start eating flesh. It's not our diet, and we pay the price in our health and our mortality.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly know which source of protein I'm sticking with. Thanks for that, Dr. Klaper. And the video that you just mentioned there, I've seen it. It is awesome. Highly recommend it. Dr. Klaper, you mentioned there about vitamin B12. Just to highlight to our viewers, it's an issue for vegans and non-vegans alike, right?
Actually, it is. Vitamin B12 deficiency is widespread in many people, and it's mostly the meat eaters who have it. They damage their ability to absorb vitamin B12. Vegans, if they have a problem with B12, it's because they're not eating enough of it in their diet. And again, it's an artifact of modern sanitation. I don't want to be treating cases of cholera and typhoid fever from contaminated water, so I'm happy that they put chlorine in the drinking water, but it kills the microbes that make B12, and so we lose our natural B12 sources. Our caveman ancestors, when they dug up a root or a tuber and just ate it, and with all the soil on the surface there, they would get their B12 that way. But we don't do that anymore. So once a week, put a little B12 tablet under your tongue, or a drop of B12 liquid for 1,000 micrograms of B12, and get on with your life. But don't let that be it can't be a natural diet if I have to take a supplement. Nothing's natural in our diet and our lives anymore. But these are not the same fruits and vegetables, not the same animals. No, we've changed everything, including our water supply. And you can't make it's foolish to make a stance on ideologic purity when everything has changed. To say, well, it's not natural. We've altered nature severely, in case you haven't noticed these days. So you do the best you can. Nothing's going to be 100% without violence. Every time even a vegan steps out on the earth, I'm sure some micro little worms are being crushed or whatever. You do the best you can, but you don't cause death and suffering unnecessarily. If you can nourish yourself fully, gloriously, healthfully on a diet that didn't cause suffering to any other sentient human being, why would you not do that? Why would you intentionally, I'm going to take a calf away from a mother and a cow and cut the mother's throat, and we'll cut the baby's throat too and call it veal. Why would you do that if you don't need to anymore? So, if a million years ago, we were scavenging for carcasses and competing with leopards on the African, that's one thing. That doesn't exist anymore. We clearly go to any supermarket that's gloriously filled with whole plant foods that will nourish you beautifully. And if we've learned anything in our evolution, it's time to leave the violence behind, leave the flesh eating behind, leave the death behind, and make your life a life affirming life, by your food choices.
Perfect. And we can only do our best, and that's what we should strive for, certainly. Dr. Klaper, another area of nutritional concern tends to be that surrounding iron for a lot of folks who are considering a plant-based diet. And of course, our keto friends, they like to advocate for the notion that when it comes to plant-based sources of iron, they contain non-heme iron, whereas animal-based sources of iron contain heme iron, and they like to pitch the fact that these are more easily absorbed by the body. What is the truth, and what do we need to know?
Yes, as far as I can see, our lovely keto friends have the reality of it on backwards. The reality is when they say they are correct and say heme iron, and that's the iron that's attached to a molecule of heme, as in hemoglobin. When you eat an animal's flesh, what makes that red meat red? It's the hemoglobin in the animal's muscle and myoglobin, and there's an atom of iron in there, and it's still attached to its heme protein. And they're right; it's easier to absorb than the iron that's in plants. I'll come back, put a pin in that in a minute. But I just say, of course, iron in plants. That's where cows and buffalo and giraffes get their iron from the green plants. And here in America, we had a cartoon character called Popeye the Sailor Man, and he would open up his can of spinach when he needed strength. And why would he do that? Because there's iron in the spinach, and it would make more red blood. And so clearly plants have iron, and that's so-called non-heme iron. And it's true, the non-heme iron's a little bit, can be more difficult to absorb, but that's not a bad thing. And the iron that is in heme, that's more easily absorbable, that's not necessarily a good thing. Why? Because that heme iron that's attached to the blood of the animal that's in that red steak and that burger that you're eating, that heme iron, as I mentioned, the body can't keep it out. The intestinal membrane, even if your tissues are saturated with iron, that heme iron just barges its way in, and more iron comes into your system, more iron. And there is a real live syndrome called iron overload. And this is not a good thing because iron is an oxidizing agent. Look at your car bumper that rusts. It creates oxidation in your proteins, your genes, your nucleic acid. Iron overload is not a good thing. It leads to stomach cancers, to strokes, to heart attacks. And our red meat eating keto guys, ooh, I'm getting lots of iron. You're getting too much iron. The good thing about the non-heme iron, the Popeye spinach green iron, is that the body, if you're fully replete in iron stores, the body can say enough for non-heme iron. We don't need any more in, and your intestinal memory can keep the non-heme iron out, so you've got some control over the absorption of it. So, so they've got it on backwards. It's not a great asset that heme iron barges right in. Now, the non-heme iron can be a little challenging to absorb into the vegan's bloodstream. Turns out that you can increase the absorption of the iron into the blood by a factor of 6 with the addition of vitamin C. So does that mean you got to take a vitamin C tablet with your spinach? No, it means that if you've got a big plate of green vegetables on your plate, squeeze some lemon juice over it. If you're making spinach salad, throw some mandarin orange slices in there. Get that citrus and greens combination going. Put green pepper, bell peppers in with your salad. And the vitamin C in these vegetables will help you absorb the iron, so your body can get more of what it needs there. So so all the way around, another part of the misshapen ideas that may keep people from adopting a vegan diet. There's no real reason to. You're going to get plenty of iron if you follow the advice that I mentioned.
Fantastic. And let's not forget that iron absorption by our body is largely dependent on how much we've already got stored as well, such as how much iron does our liver naturally store. So there are lots of factors, and we must consider all of them when we're coming to this. Also, Dr. Klaper, how much iron do we actually need?
Well, it depends who you are. If you're an adult guy like I am, we don't need very much because we're not losing iron. And we only, men and postmenopausal women, they lose about 2 or 3 milligrams of iron in their sweat, and then the skin cells, they slough off every day. So they only need 2, 3, 4 milligrams of iron a day if their stores are fully replete. Young women like you, still in your reproductive years, you're losing iron every month in the menstrual flow. So folks with a female persuasion in your age, you folks need a good 12 or 18 milligrams of iron every month. And again, so it's really incumbent upon folks in your category to eat those greens along with the vitamin C containing foods. And dried fruits are your friends when you're not trying to lose a lot of weight. So the raisins, the sultanas, I think you call them there, the dried apricots, dried prunes, these are full of iron, and so they should show up in the diet of people who need iron as well. So so us folks of the male persuasion, we have an easier path a bit on the iron there. So it depends what kind of body you're walking around in.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that. Just listening to you talking about those delicious foods is making my mouth water. So thank you so much. And I actually grew up watching Popeye. I always knew he was a good guy.
Indeed. Now you know why. That's great.
Absolutely. Dr. Klaper, I would like to address the elephant in the room, the big old elephant, aka type 2 diabetes. Now, when I was a child, I remember it not really being heard of very much. If anything, it was a middle-aged disease for, middle-aged people, and it tended to be folks who were most likely overweight and not living the healthiest of lifestyles who'd be diagnosed with it. But the rate at which people are being diagnosed with it today is absolutely astounding. Children as young as 8 years old are being given the diagnosis. Teenagers, athletic teenagers, are having to inject themselves and being told they have type 2 diabetes. And that really causes us to question, well, what causes type 2 diabetes? There's that age-old sort of theory that, to put it simply, it's down to too much sugar, too many carbohydrates in our diet. And so, one day our pancreas suddenly decides, no, sugar overload, I can't take it anymore. I'm just going to stop secreting as much insulin. I'm not going to produce as much. And as a result, there's insulin resistance and, there's just too much sugar in our bloodstream and thus diabetes. But to be honest, I find it difficult to get my head around that theory, particularly because I know that our body, its main source of fuel is sugar. It's carbohydrates converted into sugar. And even when we think about, say, our brain functionality, we know the brain primarily runs on glucose. So I find it hard to believe that suddenly my body that has this great design suddenly decides, no, I'm not going to do what I'm supposed to. Rather, the idea that what actually causes type 2 diabetes is years on a high-fat diet, causing fat to accumulate within the bloodstream, and thus that fat then moving into the muscle cells and, causing a barrier to form, intramyocellular lipid to be exact, and thus our poor sugar molecules, they can't get in, and they're so desperately needed by these muscle cells. And so they just kind of stay there or in the bloodstream. They have nowhere else to go, and thus our blood sugar levels spike, and this results in type 2 diabetes. What does the science say? What do we actually know?